Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for tuning in to our docu-series for Tell the Truth, Own Your Identity. Today, we are here with Kelli Kelley, and she's here to share her journey of owning her truth and her identity. So without further ado, here is Kelli.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
I am originally from Los Angeles, California. I moved to Atlanta when I was about 15 or 16 years old. My career path has been in communications. So I started in traditional PR many moons ago, before there was even social media or any of that. I made the switch with my business to digital in like 2014, when I just started to see the whole industry changing. I am married and I have one daughter and a wine writer.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up.
So I grew up in an area in Los Angeles called Highland Park. I grew up with a single mom, pretty much just her and I. We stayed in Los Angeles till about till about 95. And then we moved to the Valley, which was a really big change from inner city to the Valley. And then shortly thereafter, we moved to Atlanta, which was probably the biggest change of my life. Culturally, just everything. It was a really tough adjustment for me back then as a 15-year-old. But luckily, I ended up getting into a new high school. So shortly after I moved here, and that just kind of made it a little easier to make friends. Nobody had a crew or a clique. We were all new. It was a brand new school, and we were the first class in that school. So that was probably the highlight of my adolescent years. In the fall of 98, I went to Florida A&M University, and I was there for 4 years. I got my undergrad there, and my last semester there, I just decided I wanted to work in fashion, and I was going to move to New York. So I did that a year after I graduated, and that really helped shape me as a young professional. New York is not very forgiving for the meek and the shy, so it really helped to come out of my shell and just learn how to assert myself in a better way in my early 20s. And it was really life-changing. And then in 2006, I moved back to Atlanta, and that brought me to today.
Well, I love how you spoke about just New York not being like for the meek or the shy. Going through that experience, did that kind of help you shape your confidence in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a day job there, but I also had aspirations to be a fashion stylist. And when I moved there, obviously this was this was in 2002. So you could still kind of crash fashion week. It wasn't as sophisticated as today. And when I moved there, my colleagues that were my age and kind of coming up at the same time were like, if you just walk up to the tents and you act confident, you will get in. And I was like, what? No way.
They can't do that now.
No, it's all very secure. But I tried it, and I did it, and I got in, and I was awesome. That was kind of like game changer for me, because this was like, a young person wanting to work in fashion, like getting into fashion week. It was definitely a confidence booster. And I was like, wow, if this can work, maybe I should try some other things to get out of my shell. So that whole experience, I was there for about 2.5 years, and it shaped me. I mean, that city is not for keeping your mouth closed or being mild or meek. Like, you really have to find yourself and push yourself to higher limits. And that was just very foundational for me.
So transitioning from like the West Coast to the East Coast, do you feel like it impacted you in a way? Like, was it like a culture shock at one point?
100%. I mean, when we first moved from LA to Stone Mountain, Georgia, I didn't even get the accent. I didn't even understand. It was really rough.
It's totally different on the West Coast.
It's totally different. I came off probably not as nice, but I didn't understand the accent. And, it was a really tough adjustment. I had the bright idea when we first moved here that I would flunk out of school, and that would make my mom move us back, which didn't work. I just had a ton of work to do over Christmas break. Once she got the grades in, she was very, very into education. So my idea was like, you know, if I flunk out, like she'll take me serious. We'll move on. That didn't work.
So within your journey of just being an entrepreneur and just also navigating the fashion industry, which I know can be kind of crazy because I've had my own experience in it, how did you do you feel like there was an avenue for Black women at the time, or were you trying to just kind of mold your own avenue?
It was really molding your own. I mean, back then you didn't have the tools to scale anything. You didn't have Facebook, you didn't have Instagram, you didn't have these communities of people hyping you up, sharing resources. You kind of just had to do. I don't even remember how I found out what events were happening back then. I really don't. I don't remember how we did that. I don't remember how I found out how to get into a group that volunteered for Fashion Week. I don't remember how we did any of that back then. Let alone how you overcame the kind of either conscious or subconscious racism of being a woman and a woman of color,
right.
Try to do anything. I've never let that, I still don't today, but I still feel it. I've never let that stop me. But I'm always aware. I'm always aware of when I'm passed over for certain things, strictly because.
Yeah.
And I've seen this play out even in my public relations career when I would pitch certain people, especially here in the South. I mean, forget it. As a PR girl, you weren't really taken serious with the higher end clients because you were a Black woman. And I would see, prime example, I would see press releases sent out by my white colleagues with grammatical errors, just awful. And I would be like, how did they get this client? How are they keeping this client? Like, what is going on? And the more I would talk to other women of color, they would be like, they think that we are not as qualified, not as good, ghetto. They're just going to give us their hip hop clients or their urban client or like whatever. And I was just like, no, that's, like I said, I never let it stop me. I'm aware of it, but I just try to do my best to push through. I'm always pushing myself to be better. Even in my craft with digital marketing, I'm always pushing to be better or the best, period. And whoever doesn't see that at this point in my life, I'm just kind of like, you're missing out. Because I know what kind of work the person you're working with is doing, and it ain't quality. So
I love that, because I think there's like this thing that, I mean, it's the truth that Black women do have to work 2 times as hard.
Yeah.
But when you're able to create your own avenue like you have, it's really good. So you can kind of just, figure out, who's for you, who's not. As you kind of go throughout your journey currently where you are now, how do you feel like the experience of just trying to be good enough for people or just like owning your own lane has affected your identity?
I think now as I'm starting to get a little older, I don't feel the need to prove the obvious so much anymore. I do push myself to be better or good, and I'm always reviewing and critiquing my own work, but I don't feel this need to like prove it beyond what is reasonable, I guess is a fair thing to say. When I was younger, it was always like, well, let me do better. Maybe I should do more discounts, or maybe I should do more for free. Nah, none of that no more. I know what I'm capable of. I know my value. And whoever is not wanting to work with me strictly based on, I don't even bother with it. There's 7 billion people in this world. We do live in a time where you have access to the world. You have access to a global economy. So I don't feel the pressure necessarily that I felt in my 20s, where it was like you're in the city and it's like, as a publicist, you're kind of relegated to those, top 10 or 15 companies. I don't feel that anymore. It's a whole new world. And, I'm willing to put myself out there, and I know how to access people. And so that's kind of what I focus on.
Love it. So, and with how you navigate as just as a publicist, how does that affect like your other aspects of life, like whether it be your family life, your other relationships that you also have, like in your work?
I technically got out of public relations once I made the switch to digital. I didn't like having to be at the mercy of the media. I didn't like being at the mercy of an editorial calendar. I didn't like being at the mercy of, somebody, a big brand coming in last minute, throwing money at the publication, and then my client gets dropped or pushed or whatever. I didn't like that model at all. I didn't feel it was sustainable. And so by the time I started to see what Facebook and Instagram could do, to me, it was like an aha moment. I was like, well, this is what every PR client I've ever had really wants. You get to put your message out when you want it. You do not have to wait for somebody to approve your pitch. And you get to measure more accurately than, oh, our magazine was shown to this many people. Well, who the hell knows how many people were looking at it then? And then today, nobody even looks at magazines that much. But as a communications professional, my identity it's kind of interesting because I'm like a dual personality. I'm really still that introverted person. I really like to just kind of stay in my bubble. And people are like, well, how can you be like that if you're in like marketing? And I'm like, because I know how to turn it on and off.
Yeah.
Probably over the last 10 years, I've really figured out that healthy medium of what I need to give of myself to do my job. And then when I'm at home, I'm at home. Like I'm not on really when I'm in my inner circle and when I'm at home. If I'm at a networking event or anything having to do with, I need to work this room, I'm gonna work it. Yeah. But if it's just like me and my personal, I really don't want to talk to nobody. I just want to chill with whoever I came with. So It's kind of interesting.
No, I feel you. I admire that because I'm introvert myself and I'm still trying to find balance. How do you find the confidence to as an introvert, how do you find the confidence to kind of turn on that like extrovert aspect when you're like out there trying to network?
I think for me, it's just really a matter of understanding what has to be done to get the job done. And maybe the job is expanding my network. It's not, to me, I know by now, it's not always about closing a client on site at a networking event. Sometimes it's just the RO or the conversion is you need to expand your network. You need to meet new people. If the event has a speaker, maybe you need to meet that speaker because you need to kind of tap into their network. So I just kind of look at it like that. Years ago, when I was in New York and I was trying to do the styling thing, and I just shared this story with somebody the other day, it was a mental turning point for me because it was a video shoot for Bad Boy, and Puffy it was for the Biggie duet song video, and he wanted all of Bad Boy involved.
Yeah.
And so he, they only provided stylists for the main artist. So I got tapped to like be stylist for the producers or somebody. But it was a huge production. It was at this beautiful loft in Tribeca. I mean, all the top people in fashion and jewelry were there. And I did not speak to a single soul that night. Wow. And I knew, and I said to myself, you're going to regret this for the rest of your life. If you sit in the corner and you do this introverted thing and you don't network in this room with almost every major player in the city, you're going to regret it. And I was there from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. and I didn't talk to anybody.
Girl, how?
I did not talk. Puff, Zach Posen, Jacob the Jew. I mean, it was a luxury loft full of the who's who. And I sat in a corner and I knew that I would regret it, but it's something I never forgot. And so when I'm in a room, I kind of tap into that. Like if you choose to not work this room, you are still that 22-year-old person wasting opportunity. Yeah. Do you want to be that person? I mean, I rode the subway home at 8 a.m. and I was like, you are nuts. Like you just wasted the last 12 hours of your life, like sitting in a corner. Like I never forgot it. It made no sense. And so for me, I always kind of draw on that when I get into a room, if I'm ever feeling like, oh, I just kind of want to, look, you remember how you felt. You remember what happened. You better get out here and talk. And what I was afraid of back then has proven to not be true. I think certain people think like, well, if I go up to a group, they're not going to talk to me. That's never happened to me. So, at this point in my life, I just know what has to be done. I remember what happens when you don't do what has to be done, and I just do it.
Yes, I love your confidence. It's like sometimes no matter how shy you feel inside, the fact that you can show that confidence, everyone's gonna feel it. So they're gonna vibe with you and really want to have that conversation. So outside of being an extrovert as an introvert at home or in other spaces that you occupy, how do you make sure that you're serving yourself and taking care of yourself after you've done the networking, but now it's time to go home and relax and take care of yourself?
Well, interesting you should ask. Last spring, I decided to go to therapy.
Yeah, therapy.
I had, yeah, right. I had just been trying to handle all my insecurities or issues on my own. And it kind of came to a head last spring. And I was like, I need to go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And almost a year in therapy has really been therapeutic for me as a whole, personally, professionally. I've learned coping skills. I've learned how to manage my anxiety a little better. I've learned how to unpack certain traumas that I didn't even realize were traumas in my life that affect the way I move as an adult.
Yeah.
And I never connected the two. And my therapist has also encouraged me and pushed me to find things that make me feel better, like going to the gym, sometimes just reading, unwinding. I was on for the last probably 15 years trying to build a business in one form or another. I had one gear, go, just go, push, no relaxing, relax for what? That's a waste. Now I'm just kind of like, you need to like sometimes take a step back and relax. It's okay to relax. I don't know why I had it in my mind that if I'm not pushing myself to a tizzy, I'm not being productive.
Yeah.
And she's helped me to really understand that it's not always about that. And that's not sustainable. You'll burn out before you reach whatever it is you think you're trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually just spoke on at Georgia State University here in Atlanta about entrepreneurship and mental wellness. And I was trying to encourage these young entrepreneurs who are still students and they're dealing with a lot. Like, you've got to take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
The push through is not sustainable long term. You will burn out and you will not get to whatever it is you think you're pushing so hard to get to.
Girl, I feel like you talking to me this whole time. Because it's just like, I think we have this idea of like hustle, or that we want to be this entrepreneur, especially in the world of social media. We're all trying to be like the next person. And just that step back just really helps you, recollect yourself. So as you've gone through your journey from, going to California to New York to where you are now in Georgia, how do you feel like your journey has impacted your mental health?
I think, well, my therapist helped me to understand that up until recently, I've been operating in survival mode.
Oh, wow.
Just in terms, like as a whole, like from a teenager to now, it's just been survival mode. And that impacts the way you move in a lot of ways. It impacts the way you are in your personal life. It impacts the way you parent. It impacts the way you run your business. And I've just been in a mode of reflection for the last probably 3 or 4 months since we've had that breakthrough in therapy. I don't want to just survive. I don't want to push myself to the brink of exhaustion every time. Like, that's insane. Now I can see it. Back then, and I remember asking her, I'm like, well, if I don't push myself this hard, how do I get what I want?
Where's the balance in that?
Right. She's like, she said that, your superpower is your ambition.
Yes.
You have to learn how to manage it. Because if you don't manage it, it will convince you that you need to push yourself this hard. And that's just not going to work.
That's deep.
So I think my life's journey has definitely impacted the way I am. But the best thing I could have done for myself was go to therapy so I could understand better, understand where I've come from, understand what I've been through, how it is shaping me, how it is impacting the way I make decisions, and then tweak that to be more serving for my better self. I'm not going to change necessarily, but I can manage it in a way that helps me to be a better person overall, not just this machine or what I think in my mind is a machine of just kind of going hard and all else be damned. Let me just push through. And it's like, okay, well, now your blood pressure's high. Now you're stressed out. Like, now your anxiety is peaking all the time. Like, you got to figure out a better way.
What was that moment where you're like, okay, I need therapy, I need help, I need to find a way to manage? Like what was that moment for you?
So last February, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure. And that was really a wake up call for me. My top blood pressure reading was 160 over 105,
Wow.
which is really high. And I didn't know that. And, you know, the doctors were kind of looking at me like, okay, well, you don't smoke. You know, you're not obese. Like you need to change some stuff. And I also started to feel severe anxiety when I was driving. Like I always kind of envisioned cars crashing into me.
Oh, wow.
And that for me was like, okay, something is wrong. Like I should not every time I'm in the car think that I'm going to get into an accident. What is this about? What's the core? What's the source of this? And that really pushed me to seek out a therapist. Now, one of the major reasons I had not been willing to see a therapist in the past was because I assumed they would want to put me on medication, and I didn't want to be on medication. And that's not the experience I've had with this therapist. We have not talked about medication yet. And this is not a knock to anybody who needs it. Yeah. But if you're worried about going to therapy because you're afraid that's going to be the answer out the gate, don't let that stop you. That might not be the case. You might just need some different coping skills. But if you seek out a therapist, instead of being an audience of one in your head, you're talking to a trained professional that can help you figure out what you do need. Maybe you just need 2 sessions a week to start to unpack some stuff. Maybe you do need medication, and here's our plan for that, so you don't feel like you're going to be hooked on this forever. But in my mind, I was like, I don't want to see it there. They're going to put me on drugs. I don't want to be on drugs. Yeah. So I'm not going. And it's like all this value I've gotten in the last almost year, I may not have had that if I'd have just kind of stuck in that mode where like, I'm not going to a therapist. They're going to put me on drugs. And, you know, it's just been so beneficial to me. And I'm so grateful that I decided to go.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Because I think it's important because I think we all have our reservations about therapy, especially as Black women. We're like, I don't want to go to a therapist. Like, they're going to tell me something's wrong.
I ain't telling people my business.
Exactly. They can't tell me how to live my life. So it's good that you're like, I don't want to go because X, Y, Z. How did you push past that? Like, okay, so they're probably going to put me on drugs because that's what I'm thinking about. But like, I need to go.
I just felt like I couldn't handle it on my own anymore.
Yeah.
And that is a theme with me in and of itself. I have pretty much for my whole life felt this sense of responsibility. I think part of that has to do with being an only child to a single mom. You're given a lot of responsibility very early. You are tasked with managing a lot for yourself. And that's not a blame game. It's just kind of the reality of it. And so as I've matriculated into being an adult, I see my issues and my problems or whatever as my own. Talk to you for what? This is my problem.
Right.
When I had my daughter, I had it in my head that I wasn't supposed to ask for help because I decided to have a baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
The mind is powerful, I tell you.
And my mom passed in 2007. And, my mother-in-law, who's a lovely woman, and we've had an opportunity to kind of touch on this because I'm just more clear-headed now, but I don't know. I just had it in my mind. Like, I'm not about to call her to come I chose to have a baby. This is my responsibility. Like in hindsight, I'm like, that was so dumb. Like, it's a lot when you first have a kid and the help is necessary.
Absolutely.
I had very, very bad postpartum, which contributed to this dialogue in my head. Like you need to figure it out on your own. You need to push through whatever you're feeling. You don't need to leave your baby with anybody. This is your kid, your responsibility. You deal with it. And that's just, hindsight is 2020. And that's not, you need help. Everybody needs help.
Would you say the postpartum was a part of your journey to feeling like that you need to get support of friends or family or just attending a therapy session?
Absolutely. I mean, when I was experiencing postpartum, I didn't even know that's what it was, because I assumed postpartum meant you had thoughts of hurting your baby, and I didn't have that. I just had thoughts of not being intelligent, not knowing it was an attack, because my identity was really wrapped up in my professionalism.
Okay.
Before I had a kid, I would push through 15-hour days, just work, work, work. My business and growing my business was super, super important to me. And my identity was wrapped up in that a little too much. So when the postpartum hit, it was like, you're not smart. You don't know what you think you know. Why are you trying to do this business thing? It was like the lights shut off in my head. I didn't have a creative thought. I couldn't find my way out of it. And so because it wasn't directly about my baby, I didn't recognize it as a side effect of postpartum. It was just kind of like, oh, I'm dumb. Okay. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know anything. Like, and it was hard. It was really hard because, I would want to kind of have that balance. Like, I loved my baby. I loved her, but I still wanted that kind of touch with my creative side, my professional side. And I just couldn't figure out how to balance it at first.
Yeah. That's like, I'm taking all that in because it's like, because postpartum, I always thought to myself, from what they teach you, like in media, is just something surrounding your child. But the fact that it's related to you and your value and how you feel, it's a big, like, 360 view of what people say it is. So when you're going through this process emotionally, how is it affecting, I guess, how you translate to other people? Like, was it affecting how you present yourself or the other relationships around you?
I know that it definitely had an impact on the only person I was even around. Like, I wouldn't go out. So it was like a lot of bickering with my husband, just this feeling of being like I can't say what I really feel. That's number one.
Yeah.
I had my daughter in November, and I remember somebody saying to me, oh, this is the perfect time. Like, it's the winter. You can just cuddle and snuggle with your baby. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And I want to do that sometime, but I also want to do this other stuff. And I felt guilty for feeling that way. I felt guilty for wanting to keep my business alive, for wanting to do these other professional aspirations. And I didn't share. I felt embarrassed by the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I felt they were wrong. And I didn't tell anybody. Like, me expressing like my postpartum journey and any issues with my mental wellness, this is all new within like the last couple of years, because I felt so ashamed about it for so long. And then the first time I shared it, I had so many people like messaging me or coming up to me after a presentation. Like, I'm so glad you shared that. Like, I feel the same way, and I don't know who to tell, or if I can tell somebody, because I feel embarrassed. I feel ashamed. And I think, as women, motherhood or not, we should be more open to sharing these things, because oftentimes it's other people are feeling it too. And it helps to hear somebody say, yes, I have felt that too. And it's not a reason to be ashamed.
Exactly. And it's so common. So I definitely appreciate you being vulnerable enough to share that so people can see a reflection of themselves. As you continue to go through that process with just experiencing postpartum, when did you feel like you finally like overcame it or found a way to kind of cope with it?
I think it took longer than I thought. One of the first things that I did was early on to kind of keep connected to my profession and that whole world. I don't know if you have kids, but when they're little, they eat like 16 times a day around the clock. You got to feed them, you got to burp them. That stuff takes like 45 minutes, right? So I thought, for the evening feedings, I would pull up the iPad next to me, and I would go on YouTube, and I would find videos related to my profession, just to stay connected, just to have some sort of intake of what's going on with marketing, what's going on with digital. Like, I needed that. And I found that I could do it if I would I didn't have to read. I could just pull up a video and I could have her on one side with the bottle burping or whatever. And then I would have the iPad on the other side and I could still have that connection. And that was, it sounds so small now, but it was so important to me. And I would look forward to those times where I could kind of like tap into that world, because the rest of the day is around the clock baby care. But at night, I would set aside that time and I would just have my eye and I'm like, okay, cool. Like this is what's going on Instagram. Okay, that's dope. Like what's going on YouTube? This is what's up. And it would be fulfilling for me. And that was kind of the first step for me. And then over time, it was just finding things to self-educate myself on the industry, figuring out that parenthood is not perfect. You think, and I made a post about this not too long ago, like I was very obsessed with systems with my parenting. I felt like I should have my daughter on the system. Like this is how things should work. And ain't none of that. These kids do what they want to do. And especially like, that small, it's no. But the more I would like, the system wouldn't work, the harder I would be on myself. Until recently I was like, it's not a system. You do the best you can, you give the effort you can, and that's it. And it still is important for you to have these other joys in your life. It's okay to have both. So, over time, I mean, the breakthroughs are still coming. She's 4, so I'm still learning new things about myself. Yeah. And I have a feeling I'm not done yet.
Yeah, it's for a long journey. I don't have any children, but I can imagine that just being a mother is just so, I don't want to call it hard, but it's a journey.
It's hard. It's hard. And it's hard to find your groove, whatever that looks like for you, finding what is going to work for you and your family. And that's sometimes based on your support system, based on your resources. It's a lot. Yeah.
As you became a mother and you've just birthed this new love for like digital media, how do you feel like you're a new person since you've like gone through that transition of kind of learning how to reconnect with your creativity?
Oh, 100%. I feel like a new person, definitely with the work I've been doing in therapy and coming to, having a few different breakthroughs about parenting, about business, about entrepreneurship, about me as an individual, about me as a wife. Like I've had a lot of breakthroughs. I'm so grateful to my therapist. I'm grateful for this journey to just start uncovering things. I know that I have more to learn and discover, but I do feel like a new person. I'm coming out of a kind of self-imposed weight. Like this whole idea that I had to do it on my own or figure it all out on my own is just, I can't even believe I thought that way for so long. Like I just turned 39. Like I've really thought that way my whole life. I have thought that way since I was a young person. And again, I think it stems from, given a lot of responsibility as a really young person and just kind of carrying that. Well, I need to figure it out. Like when I was in college and I ran out of money and I lost my job and my car broke down, I never told my mom, and I was hungry. Like I never told her because I was like, I have to figure this out. I decided to move off campus and get an apartment. She told me not to. So I can't call home if I'm hungry. Like I have to do whatever I have to do. Like that's been a theme my whole life. Yeah. But it's a healthier way to do that. I think being a responsible person and being accountable is good, but not to the point of burnout or exhaustion.
Absolutely. What is something that you feel like sticks with you that you've learned within just your experience in life that kind of sticks with you no matter what the circumstance is, that kind of you can apply to your life?
That probably that I am more capable than I think. Up until recently, when things would go left or not go my way, I would get into this mode like, this sucks. Like, it's never going to work out. Like, I'm going to fail. Like, da, da, da. And more recently, I've kind of started leaning into like, it's going to be fine. You have figured out so many other things in your life. It's going to be fine. whether you got the answer now or not. It is something I had to work through therapy, because my therapist would say that, and I'll be like, but how do you know? Like, if I don't have a plan, how am I going to say to myself it's going to be fine?
Right.
And she was just like, look at everything you've ever been through in your life. You've made it through. Like, I've had trials and tribulations, and I make it through, and I was still fine. Like, I'm going to be fine. Like, it's not going to be doomsday every time something goes bad.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of people operate like that, whether they realize it or not. They, when things aren't going well, they're like, oh my God, this is going to be, and I mean, with the exception of a few like really, really devastating things, you're going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
It's like, it's not the end of the world.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
And I never felt comfortable leaning into that, because I felt like if I'm not operating from a position of panic, I'm not doing enough.
Wow.
And that is that's kind of how I've lived my life, and up until recently. And like now I don't operate that way. When things start to go bad, I'm like, okay, this sucks, but it's going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to lean into that. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to find a solution from that space. I'm not going to work myself into a tizzy and stress and get all worked up and think that's the way I have to be because I've operated that for that long. You still came to the conclusion. You can come to the conclusion from a place of peace as well. You don't have to be so frantic to get the answer.
Yeah. Do you feel like in a sense you're kind of learning to trust yourself?
Yes.
Like that you can make the right decisions?
1,000%. 1,000%. And I just didn't I didn't think like that before.
Yeah. What advice would you have for a women who are probably where you were before? They feel like they always have to be in go, go, go mode, but now they've come to a point where they're burnt out. Like, what would be the advice that you would give them as to how to come to a good mental wellness, really start taking care of themselves?
I would advise anybody who can to seek therapy. There's a lot of different solutions for that. Some people hear that and they think, oh, a doctor, like that's expensive. And there are tons of different options for that. And I think that people should try to figure out how to put that into the budget. I mean, there's tons of different resources to do that, to be able to talk to somebody. It's not just a therapist that's $150 an hour. There's a lot of different options today. And I think people should make it their priority to seek those out. Because the one thing that I remember learning in therapy from the beginning was that a lot of things that we've gone through, especially in our youth, we don't process as trauma. We typically tend to only consider trauma sexual or physical abuse. We don't think an abrupt move is traumatic. We don't think financially unstable is traumatic. Like you feel like, oh, well, I mean, yeah, it sucked to only have, this to eat, but, we just push through. You don't even consider that to be a level of trauma. So you don't think about how that can affect you as an adult. If you talk to a therapist or professional, they will help you connect the dots. And they will be like, part of the reason you act this way now as an adult is because when you were 6, blah, blah, blah. And you'd be like, what? Like, for real?
Don't even myself.
And then you start it starts making more sense to you. And once you discover that, then you can start undoing some of those things, learn behaviors, any of that stuff. So the first thing I recommend is people talk to a therapist, start unpacking that stuff.
Yeah.
The second thing I would recommend is to run your own race. I mean, and I know that's hard to say, especially today with social media. You get on the Instagram Explore page, and of course the algorithm is going to feed you everything you click on. So you got a whole feed of everybody balling out, doing this, their business is flourishing. They're in, whether it's real or not, because sometimes it's not real. Whether it's real or not, you still have to run your own race. You can't get wrapped up into what everybody else is doing, how fast they got to whatever level they're at. You've got to just run your own race and be comfortable in that.
I love that, especially when you spoke about trauma. I think we think it's so extreme. Like you said, whether it's abuse or something sexual, anything that affects you is something that's traumatic to your life. So I love that you really mentioned that. And I would love to ask you one question. How do you own yourself every day? How do you own your identity and your truth? That's
a good question. I think I own my myself and my identity every day by, number one, again, back to therapy. Shortly in the end of January, my therapist recommended that I start a gratitude journal. And she said to just write down something simple that day, every day, that you were grateful for, and it will help change how you move through your day.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be very true. So when I always know that I have that to do, it makes me move through the day from a sense of sometimes very basic gratitude. I'm grateful that there's heat on in the house. Like, I'm grateful there's food in the refrigerator. So that type of stuff kind of keeps me level from skewing to this, I got to push. Like, I got to build the business. I got to get sometimes just like, I'm grateful I have a business. I'm grateful, my daughter's healthy. I'm grateful my husband is healthy. Sometimes it's just remembering those basic things that helps to like ground me, and remembering all that I am, all that I have. That helps me to kind of like own myself, because that was something I never did before. I never took stock of what was good. I always looked at what I hadn't accomplished yet. Mm-hmm. And I've operated like that my whole adult life. And I remember even being younger when I moved to New York, and my mother telling me like she was proud of me. And I was like, why? I just got a regular job. And like looking back now, it was a pretty big accomplishment to just like pick up and go there as like a young person. But I didn't see it that way. I saw it as, I'm just a receptionist, like, proud of what?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not this famous stylist. What are you proud? Like, my mindset has always been like, I could accomplish so many things, but my brain would always be like, well, you haven't done this yet. So don't rest on your laurels. Don't get comfortable. Push.
Yeah.
Don't stop to be grateful. Although all this could be snatched away, don't stop to like smell the roses. You need to be focused and pushing. And I mean, I'm just, with the help of therapy, that's really helped me to change my mentality and just be grateful every day.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because we can be our own biggest critic. I tell you, we'll tear ourselves apart.
Anything, and never stop to be like, damn, Kels, that was a good job. Like, I don't do
Yeah. Well, if there's anything that you would want someone to take from this interview watching, what would be the one thing you want them to remember?
I would want them to remember that you are an individual first. Like, before you're an entrepreneur, before you are a mom, a wife, a husband, like anything, you are still your own person, and you have to take care of you. You are no good to anybody else or a business or anything if you are not taking care of yourself, whatever that looks like. Eating better, going to therapy, taking time to rest and recharge for real. You cannot really be of benefit to anybody else if you are not taking care of yourself first. You're a human being. You're your own person. You have your own ideas and dreams and goals, and you should take care of those. Maybe it's not in the time frame you thought. Maybe you don't get to start the business this year, but don't give up. Like, maybe it happens once the kids are out of the house. Maybe it happens once X, Y, and Z happens. But don't ever like give up on your dreams or your goals, and take care of yourself.
Definitely. Well, where can we keep up with you as far as social media?
Yeah, so social media, I am _Kelli Kelley. And then the digital marketing company page is Brand Method, BRNDMETHOD. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Twitter.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I love this. This was a very fruitful conversation. Yay. I mean, I learned a lot for myself. Good. There's a lot of stuff that I need to think about. So I have no doubt that, someone is going to be learning something from this conversation. That's awesome. So I really appreciate you for taking.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you.